In this video I'm going to explain and demonstrate the differences between the amp, cab, preamp and IR blocks within the Line 6 Helix. Hey guys, I'm Tyler and you're watching the TJS Bass channel. Thank you once again for tuning in. If you are new around here and not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button if you're into everything bass. As I said in the intro, in this video I'm going to show you everything you need to know about the amp block, the amp and cab block, the preamp block, the cab block on its own and the IR block. I'm really trying to explain to you how you would use each, why you might want to choose one over the other, and really get down to the basics of how it works. I know for a lot of people, and myself included, when I first came to the Helix probably 5 years ago now, I found it a little bit daunting and there were so many options. So I'm looking to do this kind of small short series of videos that goes through what each block does, how it functions, and really help explain to people how the Helix works. I was talking to someone yesterday at a studio who was really keen and really interested in my HX Stomp setup, and I was explaining to him why I use the floor as well. And I was just demonstrating a few things to him, and he said that he didn't really understand that was how it worked. And I think that there's so much described in the Line 6 Helix marketing and videos that you see, quick reviews, but they don't really go into the detail of how it's actually used and how practical it is and how powerful it can be if you use it. I know a few of the things I was showing him yesterday, he was just really amazed that you could do that all at once. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with the Helix that just goes unexplained, and I think would push even more people to buying it and using it. So I'm really going to do some videos guiding those things. So if there's something that you want to know about the Helix that you don't yet know, leave a comment below right now and tell me exactly what it is, and I will make sure to make a video. Saying that, this is one of those videos. This was a comment that I received on my last video on the Helix, asking about how it worked and how each of the amp and cab, IR and preamp blocks worked, and why you want to use them and how to use them. So this video is a direct response to that from one of my subscribers. I'm going to go through and break down each of those blocks right now. So I'm going to start with amp and cab, then show you the difference between a preamp block, the amp block, the cab block, and then the IR block as well. I'm going to go through each of those blocks and explain to you why you might choose one over the other to achieve your sonic aims. So first I'm going to run you through the amp and cab block. This would be the perfect candidate if you want to just recreate the rig that you use on stage. So it's just like you rock up onto a stage and there it is, there's the setup. You have an amp head and you have a cabinet below it. And this is what that block is intended for. Really simple. You can run your effects into it, you can run your bass or your guitar straight clean into it, and it's going to create an amplified sound in the flavour of the amplifier you have selected on the Helix. So I'm just going to apply that now. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go for, I think, the Ampeg B15 because I think it's a good model to choose for all these demonstrations. So as you can see, I've chosen the Ampeg B15 block, and then you've got this is the front panel of the amplifier, more front panel. This is more like the power section now, so this is the tubes in the amplifier and how you can change all these things. There are other videos I've done on this, so if you want those, check that out. I'll leave a link in the description and it'll be in the playlist that this video is into. These will all go into my Helix playlist. Now we're on to the cab section. So just notice there that I've just been pressing the page button to get across to that. Works exactly the same on the LT and the floor as well. This is the cab setup again. You can change the distance of the microphone, all the stuff you can usually do. And this is what that sounds like. For me, a bit gnarly. They're all of the presets and the default amp cab blocks in the Helix are a bit gnarly for me. But as I say, there are other videos on this. I've done a video about cleaning up the sounds of the amplifiers in the Helix. Go and check that out. It will be in this playlist and it will be on my channel. So have a look for that. I'll leave a link in the description too. So there you go, that's the amp and the cab block. That's exactly as if you just took your B15 and the B15 cab, put put them on stage and played through it. That's that. So if you want that sound going straight to your PA, or even out to a powered speaker you have on stage, or even if you just want to run it into like quite a flat response cabinet, that would be cool as well, whatever you're using, and then another one straight out into the PA. So that's giving you an amp sound on stage or for the front of house. The other options you have are to use the preamp. So we'll try the preamp block next. So you go back and just move down to the preamp section. Choose the same amplifier. So in this instance, we're left without the power amplifier options. So you don't have a choice to bias or anything like that. You just have the preamp section. So these are the controls you'd have on the front of the amplifier. I always like to think of a preamp as a preset EQ and shape, as well as a type of distortion gain staging. So for this, you might consider this like having a rack preamp in a studio, or even just a little preamp pedal. It's not recreating the sound of a speaker cabinet, and it's not recreating the sound that you get from power tubes. In this instance, it's just the EQ, so the EQ points from the amplifier that is specified, and the preamp tubes as well, and the amount of drive that those are creating. You might use this if you really like a DI sound in the studio, and just this would be the equivalent of running an XLR out from the front of your amplifier. So you're not getting the sound of the speaker, you're just going to have that clean, clear sound of the preamp with the EQ shape that the amp has already built into it. So this is how the preamp on its own would sound. So there you've got a little bit less of the low-mid thickening that the B15 cabinet naturally has, and a little bit more clarity. Still a bit gnarly for me, but as I say, all of these amps by default are quite gnarly. The next block we have is the amp block without the cabinet, so I'm going to put that in now. Now I think this on its own doesn't work so well, but I will show you anyway how it sounds. This is as if you were to take the head of the Ampeg B15, so forget about the cabinet bit, just the head, and then if you took a DI out the back of that, that's what you would be hearing. So it's got the preamp stages I've just described, so you've got all the EQ and the preamp tubes and the distortion that those give, and then in addition to that you have the power amp tubes as well, being modelled by the Helix. So this is the back of the amplifier, the bits that you can't control normally, but with a Helix you can, and that's going to give you those tube characteristics that people really like. That's giving you some extra harmonics, and it's going to give you a little bit of compression, which is what happens when you drive power amp tubes. So the controls we have here are these ones that we have previously for the preamp, with the addition of this section here with the bias. So this changes how much voltage would be going to the tubes, and as a result also changes how much distortion and how much harmonic content there is created by the power amp tube section. So I'm going to give you just an example of how this sounds alone, and then I'm going to show you what you can do to change how it sounds. So as I described, a little bit more harmonic content, a little bit more distortion that you get from the power tubes. The next block to describe is the cab block. A cab block is really an EQ that you lay over the top of an amplifier to give it the shape and sound that you expect from a mic'd speaker cabinet and amplifier combination. Now you can use a cab block on its own as an EQ to change the sound of your bass, but I think generally I prefer them when you have an amplifier driving them, as they're quite low volume blocks on the Helix, and for me there's not so much point in running a cab block without an amplifier. You can do it, it can be done, it does change the sound, and it can be interesting, but for me I don't see much point. So what I'm going to do is leave the B15 amp block as we have just demonstrated, and add a cab block to that to get rid of some of that really gnarly distortion and turn it into something quite musical. So moving across here, I'm going to change this out for a bass cab, and I'm going to choose single and then go for something quite simple. Let's just go for something different, a little bit different. I'll go for a 12-inch Del Sol cabinet. So we now have the cabinet integrated into that sound, so it's going to change the sound of the Ampeg overall. It will sound different to the original amp and cab block, and have this EQ imparted by the Del Sol cab. So for me, a little bit lacking in the bass department, but what the cab blocks also give the option to do is to add another cabinet. So we could move this here, choose another cabinet, let's choose a single, and let's choose something like an Ampeg 8x10, something you know has got a lot of beef to it. And then what I'm going to do here is move it to path B. So I've moved the Ampeg SVT cab to B, and then what I'm also going to do is to come here, take this splitter and press the action button to move it over here. So now this chain has the amp, and then this first path, path A, is running into the 12-inch Del Sol, and this path B is coming down here to the Ampeg SVT to add the character of the 8x10. And then those two are then being balanced, brought back together here, and then coming back out of the outputs of the Helix, all as one signal. So I'm going to just show you how that sounds now. There you go, with the two blended together you get that meteor sound from the 8x10, but that kind of quite distorted mid-rangey sound from the 1x12. And that's one of the real strengths of the Helix. By having these different cab blocks, you can actually have the best characteristics of one and the best characteristics of the other together. I mean, it's really unlikely that on a gig you would ever take out a B15 head, a 1x12, which is a Sun 1x12 cabinet, and then a 8x10 Ampeg cabinet and use them all together. It would just be the strangest rig. But in the Helix, you have access to all those different sounds and the way that the speakers react, and you can pair them together to create really innovative and different sounds, and really complement each other without having the odd stage aesthetic and having to lug that gear there yourself. The other benefit with them being digital is you don't have any phasing issues, so you're not going to have the issue of a 1x12 and 8x10 being slightly out of phase with each other and hitting the mixer at different times. You have them both hitting the front of house and hitting your own powered speaker or whatever you're running on stage together, and just really getting that clear sound that you have envisioned and created in your studio. One of the best places that the cab blocks can be used is by using, say, a guitar cabinet for the high end and a bass cabinet for the low end. And there's all sorts of things you can do in the Helix regarding EQ to dictate which of those cabinets is getting which signal. But that's something you can definitely play with. It's kind of a more advanced thing to do down the road, so for this video I'm not going to go into that, but definitely think about it, consider it and check it out. The last thing I'm going to do in this video is show you the IR block. Exactly the same as the cab block really, but it's your own personal IRs that you've downloaded or created yourself, and use those within the Helix. So I have my own IR, which is the IR from these cabinets, which is the Aguilar SL112. Let me know if you want access to that. I'm happy to send it to people. Put it in the comments below, and if there's enough interest, I'll actually probably just make a website so you can download it. But yeah, I've been sending these off to people, the IRs, and a small PayPal tip if you want to send it back to me, if you enjoy the cabinet. If not, you can just have it for free and do what you like with it. But I'm going to show you that IR right now, and pair it with the Aguilar DB751, which is this head right here, but the virtual version of it right within my Helix stomp. So I'm going to just clear all the blocks. Pop the amp base, which is the Aguilar 51, and then choose the IR block. This is my personal IR that I use for all my gigs, combined with the Aguilar head digital version that I use on the Helix. So this is how I run it. I have an amp block and then I pair it with an IR block in order to get the sound that I want. So that's the rig that I use for my gigs. I haven't tweaked the amp to how I normally have it and set it. That's a bit gnarlier than mine is. But what I've given you there is a demonstration of my IR as well. And I think the IRs that I've created have always been a lot cleaner than those that are built into the Helix. One thing about the cabinets that are built into the Helix is that they're all based on quite old cabinets. And those speakers don't produce a lot of high power, clean tone. They all distort fairly early, and I think that's one of the things that contributes to the amount of distortion that you get from the default blocks on the Helix. As I say, they can be cleaned up, and I'll leave that link in the description. It's in the playlist and on my channel, but you can definitely clean these up. But I found my IR was much closer to the sound that I wanted to hear, which is the sound of this rig. So effectively what I have is that rig in my Helix, but really useful to keep in mind that your own IRs and IRs that you can buy and download can really have a massive effect on the tone. As I say, for my personal use, I tend to use the amp block separately and then my own IR as my cabinet, but there are a load of options, as hopefully you've seen and I've described to you. Let me know what your thoughts are on the use of amp blocks, preamp blocks, and cabinet blocks, and let me know if this video has been helpful to you and really helped you understand how to use them. If not, tell me why not in the comments below, and I'll try and get back to you and really make sure that I'm giving you guys the information that you need to be successful with the Helix and get that sound that you really have in your head. If you like this video and it helped you out, hit that like button and consider hitting the subscribe button and that notification bell to be kept up to date with when I release my content. For now, that's all I have on the different blocks in the Helix, but if there's something you want to know, again, put it in the comments below and I'll make sure I do a video on it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around soon.